you know exactly what's required of you. You can get there, and yeah, that's what I've been focused on.
Hello and welcome to The Law According To. This is the podcast where I speak to legal professionals about their career and experiences to date. And today I'm glad to be joined by Dan Norris of Churches. Dan is a senior solicitor in the family law team at Churches in Ryde on the Isle of Wight. After obtaining his law degree from the University of York, Dan joined Churches as a trainee, qualifying as solicitor in 2019. In his spare time, Dan acts as a mentor to students at both York and Portsmouth universities. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. You're very, very welcome. So, Dan, let's kick off talking about your career, and we'll go back to the very beginning. What was it that initially drew you towards a career in law?
Yeah, so in order to take you back to the start, we've got to go a long way back, actually. So it sounds a bit cliche when I say this, and a lot of people laugh whenever I tell them about sort of my journey. But it all started really, I think I must have been about 10 years old, and it was my dad who planted the seed and said to me, "You're right, Dan, you're going to be a lawyer one day." And I think that was because he always, well, maybe it's because he wanted me to take care of him in his old age and thought that would be a sustainable career. Maybe that was it. But I think it was because he saw in me that I had a real eye for detail, and I was quite obsessed over the sort of finer details and things. And that really was clear from a very early age. And I remember my nickname at preschool, no, not nursery, was Detail Daniel.
Okay.
I honestly don't know what I did to be coined the name Detail Daniel, but I must have been obsessed over something really insignificant and minute that made the staff laugh there. But yeah, ever since then, I think Dad really sort of noticed that this might be a career path which would suit me, and so he really kind of glammed it up for me at an early age, and I still remember to this day him saying to me things like, "Dan, you're gonna be an international lawyer. You're gonna walk into a tailor's in Singapore and say, right, I need a suit, please," and they're gonna one. And well, I ended up well with a body of water in between me and home on the Isle of Wight, but not quite Singapore in the end. But yeah, ever since then, I've just been obsessed. I was obsessed with the idea of becoming a lawyer, and I honestly didn't really think about ever doing anything else. I always considered myself, and I do consider myself to be quite a personable and quite an empathetic, and considerate type of individual. And so I always wanted to make sure that whatever I did allowed me to be empathetic and personable, in my job, because I thought that would be the most rewarding thing for me. And law just ticked all those boxes. I knew it would allow me to be very detail orientated and very serious, and at the same time kind of giving a bit back and doing things to help people. That's what always struck me about it when I was younger. I then did my first work experience in a law firm when I was 16 at a local firm in Gosport where I grew up. And I remember thinking, that it sounded all really important. And the solicitor I was shadowing he would run around everywhere in the office, and he would always be doing something, and he would literally run between offices. And I think I just sort of thought, wow, this man's really important. He's really busy. He must be doing something really worthwhile. And that just captivated me. I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to feel like I'm really making a difference in people's lives. And ever since then, it was a no-brainer. I applied to do law at York, did my 3 years there, did the LPC straight away, and then started my training contract at Churches. And then eventually settled in the family team. So yeah, that's really where it started, and where I am now.
Okay, so your dad saw the early potential and nurtured that, and look where you've gone. Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned that you're in the family team. What particularly was it about family? What drew you towards family law?
Yeah. So what drew me to family was, I think it was, the bottom line is, it was something that stimulated me more than anything else. That I think was probably the defining factor for me when deciding which way to go. And so what I think that means is, when I was at work, I was just a lot more enthusiastic, and I was a lot more interested to learn about the law, and I was a lot more interested in the cases and a lot more interested in the clients. Just felt a bit more of a buzz about family law, and you know, it just the fact that you are fighting a corner in this area most of the time, and I know that's potentially not helpful phrasing, because we don't fight in family law. We try and resolve
Hmm.
issues.
Sure.
Occasionally, it does. Yeah, occasionally you do need to put forward a position and argue a point. And to me, that was a lot more interesting and a lot more exciting and gratifying than just completing a process. And I mean that's probably the case in, with a transactional type area and a contentious area. Um, Transactional areas like conveyancing, or wills and probate or something like that. You know what the end result's going to be. You know full well that in a conveyance, it starts with a sale and it ends up with a completion, or
Hmm.
starts with a purchase, ends with a completion. With a will, you know that whenever you take will instructions, the end result is going to be a will. What I like about family law is, it may start off with some instructions to deal with finances arising out of a divorce, but in terms of what the end result is, yes, it's going to be a court order of some sort. But if you're in court and asking a judge to make a decision, you don't know what the judge is going to say. You obviously know what the principles are and know what should happen, but what that judge says on the day, and the phrasing he uses and the language he uses, no one knows that until you hear it from the judge. And I remember thinking, this is like reading a book and you don't know the ending, or being at the cinema
Hmm.
and you don't know the ending to a film and you're really sort of anxiously awaiting the outcome. I think it's like that in family law, where you kind of don't really know what's going to happen. Um, and that was quite exciting for me when I was training. And so, yeah, the bottom line was, I was just much more stimulated by it. I liked that I was fighting a corner. I liked that I was getting really positive outcomes for everyday people on the street who is a lot of the time in real dire need of help. That was
Hmm.
always going to be more gratifying to me on a personal level. And I thought that I could have a more personally successful career for me with doing those things, as opposed to more transactional area like wills and probate or conveyancing.
Yeah. So you had that more kind of, I suppose, in a way, human elements, but also the like you say, the unpredictable sort of element to
Yes.
it as well, rather than the transactional, like you say, in
Yep.
property
Yep.
or wills and probate. Um,
Yep.
okay, so I imagine, as with any sort of journey, there would have been some challenges along the way. What would you say was maybe one of the bigger obstacles you've had to come overcome in your career so far?
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately, I didn't really know what I wanted back when. I mean, having said that, that's kind of bizarre, isn't it? Because I've just talked at long length how I always wanted to be a lawyer. That was the extent of it up until I was probably about 21 years old. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't know what type of lawyer I wanted to be, and that proved to be a massive challenge and a hurdle I really needed to overcome and think quite carefully about. I
Hmm.
think I was, at the end of the day, I was not misguided, but I was just unclear about the route in and what I needed to do to actually get to where I was. Probably because I'd spent so long thinking about it. In my head, I just thought it was going to happen. But you realise quite quickly that it's not as simple as that, and you do actually have to, lay the foundations and then move towards your goal by taking steps. So
Hmm.
I think the biggest challenge was ultimately being realistic with myself about what I wanted to achieve, and then putting in place those steps to actually get there. So, taking a step back and thinking, right, what do I want to achieve out of my career? And therefore, where do I need to go? What firms, for example, do I need to be applying for? What are the areas I'm interested in? What kind of experience do I need to achieve? Um, so, when I finished uni at York in 2015, I did my LPC, but at the time I was dead set on being a commercial lawyer in London. Did all the commercial electives on the LPC, mergers and acquisitions, advanced real estate, commercial law. I did the masters in law, business and management. Was absolutely obsessed with being this high flying corporate commercial lawyer in London. And so after my LPC, moved up to London for a year and was a paralegal in the city. Um, I think probably kidding myself that it was going to happen, and was sort of very, very tunnel visioned on, yeah, this is what I want to do. But in reality, was it ever going to happen? I mean, I got very close to sort of to getting the training contract into working in London, but deep down, I had to have a very, very realistic conversation with myself that it wasn't for me, and I knew it wasn't for me. I knew that I didn't enjoy the hustle and bustle and the very high-powered and competitive nature of the environments up in London. It was never for me. It never suited my personality, and so the challenge was really having that kind of sensible conversation with myself to sort of take a step back and go, look, what are you doing, Dan? Do I need to refocus and think about what's important to me? And ultimately, that led me to move back home to Portsmouth. And I got a very lucky break, and ended up getting an interview at Churches for the training contract, and then was offered the job a couple of weeks later as a trainee. So I'd say that was probably the biggest challenge in terms of the early stages, was just getting focused and having that conversation about what do you really want from your life and your career. So that's what I'd say were the challenges in the early stages.
And was that, sorry to interject, but was that all down to a kind of an internal self kind of realization, or was there any sort of outside influence that you thought, actually, maybe this isn't the way I really want to be going? It was literally a kind of something you knew just wasn't right, and therefore you knew you had to change it, or did somebody kind of maybe plant the seed that it was time to look in a different direction?
I think probably a bit of both. I think the external factors made my inner voice louder. So I think looking back, I think I probably knew deep down that London and that kind of life wasn't for me. But I think the external factors were just things like being, just rejections. The pure fact of getting rejected from firms, that those build up, and they sort of think, okay, what's going wrong here? And also just, my experience of being there and living day to day, that's the external reality of your life up there. Every day, that inner voice does get stronger. So it was the inner voice in me that did say, look, come on, Dan, you need to refocus here. That was very much driven by the external factors, I think.
Yeah, the London hustle isn't necessarily for everyone, is it? I did it myself for 6 months, and 6 months I was only on secondment in London, and so I knew I was only there for 6 months, so I kind of enjoyed it. I was only 21 at the time as well, so but yeah, I don't see how. Each to their own, but I couldn't do it for life.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, and there's some people
just
that do
the
it.
tube journeys.
Yeah, that's it. But I'm about 6'5", so I always had to make sure I was right in the middle of the tube. Otherwise, my head would be crammed down. Like this. So that was bad in itself. But I think you're exactly right. Everyone's different, and some people do it and they love it. And I think if anyone wants to really do it, then that's fantastic. Give it a go, and you'll probably enjoy it. But it's that being realistic and thinking about what you really want is an important thing as well.
Yeah. So that was obviously a pivotal moment for you, and clearly the fact that you're now a senior solicitor status, things have progressed well for you. What do you what would you say those successes were? What would you put those successes, your success to date, down to?
So I think the success in terms of the progression through the firm is probably just due to my own kind of drive and determination, and really feeling like there's a good fit at the firm. So, I mean, it all starts with being in the right situation. So, having said that, I can't attribute that all to me. The firm has been very, very supportive, and it wouldn't have been possible without the firm having my back. So, from the very, very start, I always knew this was a firm that was going to be suitable for me and good for me. The firm are incredibly supportive. That there is a proper work-life balance, and that tends to be a word which is thrown around quite willy-nilly. But when I say that, I mean I'm usually in at 8:45 and I'm out at 5, and that there is rarely an exception to that. During the day, we work hard, and I'm on it for the day, but it means I can leave at 5 and I get the evenings. So I think the firm was right for me, and so I always felt committed and loyal to the firm for one, just giving me the shot in the first place, but also on a personal level, I'm quite a sort of determined and quite a driven sort of character anyway. So I always knew I wanted to progress up through the firm quite quickly, and that meant that I just had to focus on being the best lawyer that I could in order to get up the ladder. So ultimately, you've got to make sure that you know what you're doing and that your legal knowledge and your client care, the admin side of it is all nailed down. So I'm always on, LexisNexis, looking at sort of practice notes and stuff, and I'll read case law in my spare time just to sort of make sure that I'm as good as I can be. So that bit was sort of nailed down, and then that translates from a pure work point of view, ultimately into how many units you're recording every day and what you're billing. That's all looking really strong at the moment, and therefore that then opened up some doors in terms of progressing up. I'm also quite involved in the marketing of churches as well, so I'm one of the marketing champions at the firm for the department, and we attend monthly meetings to sort of put forward ideas on what we can do to promote the firm, and different sort of articles we want to do and videos we want to do and things like that. I've got a desire to be a partner at the firm one day, and so I always knew that's what I wanted to do, and so I was going to focus on getting there. Again, just to make clear, that wouldn't be possible without the firm. I'm not just this fantastic individual. The firm is very, very supportive. They are very keen to progress as well, and you know exactly what's required of you. You can get there, and that's what I've been focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, like you say, having that firm that does support your journey is really important, isn't it? And actually having leadership that practices, rather than just saying things like work-life balance, actually kind of demonstrating it and encouraging it is really important. It's as you say, it's kind of phrases that are bandied around quite regularly, but not necessarily meant.
Yes.
You see people like a 4-day weeks, but it's not really a 4-day week because you're expected to do 12 hours on those 4 days and things like that. So excellent. Okay, and so you've mentioned about what it is that led you to family law. What is it that you particularly love and enjoy about your work?
I'd say that I think I already sort of touched on this, but it's the sort of the excitement day to day of being involved in a case and running that case, and to some extent not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And I hope none of my clients are listening to this, because you might think, oh God, Dan hasn't got a clue what's going to happen, so why am I instructing him? You know what the law is, and you know what the processes are, and 9 times out of 10 I can make a judgment call on what I think is going to happen. But judges are human beings at the end of the day, and those are the ones who make the decisions, or magistrates if we're before the magistrates. So it's that kind of not knowing, and I do get quite a lot of excitement out of that. So that's one thing. I get a lot of gratification out of getting a good result for clients, and if I get a good client testimonial or something like that, an email comes in or a card to say that I'm so happy with the outcome. Thank you so much for your help and your support. That's the kind of stuff that really makes the job worth it, because it is stressful at times. It is challenging. In fact, I got an email half an hour before we logged on saying, "Can you urgently look at this?" because the solicitor who's normally dealing with that file is out of the office, and the court have just emailed asking for a document urgently. And so you've got to drop everything, and you've got to make sure that works, and be flexible and fit around that. So that kind of stuff can be quite stressful, and it's all made worth it whenever you get that positive review, or that really, really grateful, deserving client you've got a good result for. That's the kind of thing that makes it really worth it. And then I think I get a lot of satisfaction out of just this sort of pure fact of you get given a case, and it tends to be, if you think of it like a big ball of string that's rolled up into one and it's all tangled together, and that big ball is made up of the legal factors, the emotional factors, everything that the client wants to project onto you. They just give it to you as this big ball of string. Well, our job is to unravel that and to separate out the emotional factors that we need to push to one side, and then filter out the relevant parts of the information, and then tailor that to what the law says. And I get quite a lot of satisfaction out of doing that on a not just an academic kind of level, but also just on a personal level. It just feels quite good to know that you've created a solution, and you've thought of something when you're given something quite complex. And that generally is the case if your client is very emotional and very upset, which happens a lot because this is an emotional area of law and a difficult time in people's life, yeah, you've got to push that to one side to some extent and still be very tentative and still be very conscientious. And I always make sure I am. But at the end of the day, you've got to push that to one side to some extent and really focus on the solutions and where you're going. And I find that quite satisfying, doing that and just sort of, pulling together bits of the law and coming up, giving the advice. I just like it. I think it's good. It's good fun, and it's good fun, and you get a good result for someone who's really, really deserving, and in a really rubbish situation, that feels really good, and that's what it's all about, I think.
Yeah, I guess you must see quite often in your line of work people who have come from quite a stressful situation to coming to I imagine it's not always a happy ending per se, but certainly a kind of a satisfying and knowing that they now have clarity of where their future lies, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're always they the really the deserving clients, the ones in tough situations, they're always very, very grateful whenever you get a good result for them. And so, yeah, that's incredibly satisfying whenever that happens.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Good. Okay, so you spoke earlier about that kind of pivotal moment for you when you were looking at commercial, and then you decided to come out of London and move back down south, and how you kind of came to that decision. What advice would you give to people who are in maybe a similar sort of position, or certainly in the early stages of their career, not quite sure where they want to go, even if they want to continue down the line that they are continuing, maybe they're not sure whether law is actually the right career for them. What sort of advice would you give to people in that situation?
Yeah. So the first bit of advice is just have a very clear focus and a very clear idea on what it is you want to do. So whether that's someone who knows they want to pursue a career in law, whether they're thinking about it and they are at an early stage, there is, I think I encountered the same problem when I was younger. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't really understand what that meant in practice. I mean, on a basic, very, very basic point of view, you've got the solicitor route or the barrister route. That is the sort of the earliest sort of distinction that you can draw in terms of the different directions. Well, then you look down the solicitor route, you've got generally a distinction between London firms and regional firms. You've then got a distinction between contentious area and non-contentious area, and then just sort of different sizes of firms and different areas within those different sort of broader disciplines. So I think if you want to pursue a career in law, you have to have an understanding of those differences. And then once you have a good understanding of this is the type of area, these are the available areas that I can do, this is the type of firm I can work at, these are the locations that type of firm operate from, you've got to then think, right, where do I want to focus my time? And the answer to that may well be, I don't know yet, because I need to experience those different areas, or I need to do some more research, which is absolutely fine. Because maybe you won't know until you actually do it, which is exactly what happened to me. I never wanted to do family law up until first day of my seat when I did it on my training contract. So it's having that clear outlook and really being focused on the direction is I think is got to be the most important thing for someone starting off. And one of the resources that I found most useful was something like lawcareers.net, which is a big database of all of the basically every firm in the country. And you can narrow those down by location, trainee intake, size of the firm, area, practice areas, that type of thing. And so what I used to do is spend a lot of time just going through, looking at the profiles, looking at the types of people who work there, what were their backgrounds, where did they go to uni, just thinking about, where would I be a good fit and what might be the right option for me. And the more you do that, the more you'll get to understand what is going to be appropriate for you. So yeah, I think that's probably the advice if someone's starting up. And on a more general bit of advice, it may sound like a bit of a cliche, and I hope this is helpful, but I'm a big believer in your gut instincts, and really listening to what your gut is saying. And I generally will give that advice to anyone whenever there's a choice between two different things. what does your gut say? What makes you feel more happy? What puts a smile on your face, and what doesn't? And that's the process I went through whenever basically, the way it worked out for me is I had a choice of going down the family law route or the wills and probate route. And I would have done 6 more months training in either area and then qualifying into that area. So I was sat at my desk and I just pictured myself in both of the roles, and family made me happier. And that was, you can't explain that other than it just feels good. And so
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in that. When you can't create a real, if it's not as easy as just putting a list of pros and cons,
Yeah.
what makes you happier? And I think that's really important, and that's really useful. So listen to your gut instinct is the other thing I would encourage everyone to do when making any sorts of decisions like that. I think that's a really, really powerful, underrated tool.
Yeah, very much underrated. I think because obviously there's no science behind it, is there? It's kind of, but yeah, gut instincts. If something tells you that it's right or even wrong, then go with that. But that's excellent. Yeah. So kind of basically, don't jump into a decision. Kind of take your time, make sure it feels right for you. I think being happy is so important, especially for younger generations now as well coming through. That's obviously a big focus. I think when I was starting my career, I don't think if I had said to my parents, "What do you want to do with your career?" I want to be happy. I don't think they'd have. Well, okay, but let's have something a little bit more substantial, shall we? But being happy in what you do obviously makes it that much easier to do it, doesn't it? It's if you enjoy what you're doing day to day, you can't be happy 100% of the time, but if you're happy more often than not, then it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the best answer you could have given, isn't it? What do you want to do? I just want to be happy. Surely that's the best answer you could possibly give. I mean, you start with happiness and then you figure out what you actually want to do. And it surely leaves your options much much more open. If your starting point is I want to be happy, then what a great starting point. So I think that's probably the best answer you could give as a child to that question. And then figure it out when you can.
Work out the rest.
Yeah, do you know, so Mike, I've got I mean, I suppose aimed people as well who want to pursue a career in law. One of the other things that I always advise people is in relation to actually getting practical experience. Now, getting work experience at law firms is notoriously difficult. By my own confession, I got my work experience at the firm when I was 16 because I was introduced to one of the partners at the tennis club, so that I was a member of and I was quite keen at. So it is notoriously difficult to get your foot in the door at somewhere like that. But what I would say is any type of office experience is going to be helpful, and you can draw skills that you have learned in any type of office environment and apply that to what is the day-to-day role of a solicitor actually like in reality. Things like the softer skills that you learn, how do you behave in an office? What is going to be expected of you? How do you use your emails efficiently? How to talk to people in the office, how to speak on the phone, how to be efficient. That's stuff that you can learn. You don't have to be in a law firm to learn those things. You can be in any kind of office environment. And so, you can, if you have opportunities to just work anywhere like that, anywhere sort of commercially driven, then do it, because you can learn skills, not just there, but anywhere you work. The office environment is great because you have got a screen in front of you, and that's just the reality of work is that you have a computer in front of you. I suppose on another level, any kind of work experience that you have, you can draw experience from any of that and apply that to what you want to do. So when I was in gospel, for a brief time I was a kitchen porter, so a pot washer at a local cafe on the beach. And an uncreative person might look at that and think, well, why on earth is that relevant to a career in law? Well, I would say, hold on a second. Well, let's look at what I was doing. I was prioritizing because I had to, I had to sort of manage what needed to go through the washer quickly. What could I wait to do? If I was being called to serve the food, did I have time? I was learning about teamwork. I was learning about how to communicate. I was learning about, quite subtly, the nature of working in a commercial environment. So just things like, look, you've got to do this sort of, what was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but you had to sort of rotate the food so that the older stuff was at the front, so that would get used, and so it wouldn't go to waste. I'm sure there's a word for that. I can't remember. It's been a long time. but that's the kind of commercial reality of working in a kitchen. Is you have to understand that that's necessary, otherwise the business loses money. And so, I when I was applying for jobs, I could pull 10 different skills from my time as a pot washer that I was then going to use as a solicitor. Because you just got to be quite good at reflecting on your experience and thinking, right, what skills does a lawyer need, and what have I already done, which means that I can draw on those. I think you can pull skills from any experience you have. It doesn't have to be just experience in a law firm. So that'd be the other advice that I would give to someone kind of starting off. And I think that's really quite helpful.
Yeah. I tell you another thing you learn in the catering trade as well is how to deal with stress. Because the catering trade is a highly stressful environment to work in, isn't it?
Is that from experience? Have you
yeah, well, again, early days in my career, I worked in catering, worked in restaurants for a few years, and it's just it's just incredibly stressful. And then when you look at things you've done since, and I don't think I've ever been in those moments as high, as much stress as I am when somebody's kind of waiting an extra few minutes for their dinner. But if you put it into context, it's kind of like, well, ultimately they are just waiting for their dinner. It's not the end of the world. But horrendously stressful. I remember that my time. It's been over 20 years since I worked in catering, but yeah, it's something I think it's good to go through because it does teach you about hard work for sure. But also absolutely. Dealing with challenging environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost sort of getting your teeth cut, isn't it? It's sort of if you can, I mean, this has been raised a number of different times whenever I've spoken with students. They'll say, I'll sort of ask them what their experience is, and they'll gloss over the fact that they worked at a bowling alley or they worked at a cinema or in a shop. I think I'll just think, why are you glossing over that? That shows so much, and you're exactly right. It shows a work ethic, and it shows that you've got a drive to work to some extent, and that's far more attractive than someone who hasn't got that experience. I mean, there may be a good reason either way why you had that job or why you didn't, and maybe it'd be a case by case sort of basis. But if you have got that experience, then why are you not making the most of that and thinking, well, yeah, I did work, behind the counter at the bowling alley, and this is what I learned. For example, I learned about conflict resolution because I didn't have the size 8 shoes that this lady wanted. She was really unhappy with me and started to shout at me, but I kept my cool. I understood that engaging in that and being sucked in would not be helpful to that situation, and I therefore made sure I kept my cool. I can pull that straight over to what I do day to day, where I try not to get sucked into some of the real nonsense that I have to deal with and people being overly aggressive. Well, there you go. That's just a very quick sort of example of how that could look. So you can draw experience from anything, and I totally agree. It's that real sort of showing that you have the drive to just work. It is really, really attractive, I think, to employers who do want hard workers at the end of the day. So I totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, I think that's great advice. And so it was lawcareers.net you mentioned at the beginning there. We'll include that in the overview of the episode. So if anybody does want to, I know it's not difficult to find it nowadays, but if you want a quick link, it'll be in the notes. Great, excellent. So if anybody would like to get in contact with you about your services and what you do at churches, how can they do that, Dan?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. You can find me on the website. My email address will be on there. It's dnorris@churches.co.uk, so nice and easy. Give me an email. I'm happy to respond whenever I can. Get me on LinkedIn. I think this will probably go on LinkedIn.
This will go on LinkedIn, absolutely. So this will go on YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, and Amazon Music as well. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I'll make sure I get a share on LinkedIn as well. And so hit me up on LinkedIn and drop me a message if there's anything else I might be able to add or to help. I'm more than happy to do that. So give me an email, hit me up on LinkedIn. That'd probably be the best way.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time, Dan. It's been excellent. You've shared some fantastic advice and your experiences. I've been absolutely fascinated. I appreciate that. And like Dan's just mentioned, this will be on LinkedIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and anywhere else, I guess, with the exception of iTunes. It's the only place we don't go on. Thanks very much, Dan.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Cheers.